Today, Wednesday, March 16, 2022, 9 a.m. Can I have approval of the meeting of the notes from September 22nd, 2021?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. Okay, for general public comments, the subcommittee will hear from the public on any subject. Those wishing to speak to a specific project application being considered today will have the opportunity to do so later, immediately following the project presentation. Anyone wishing to speak must sign up, which I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. To speak must, they have 2 minutes to speak. The subcommittee shall not enter into any discourse with the public. Staff update, Mr. Eric Davis.
I believe we go straight to general public comments if we have any of those.
Okay.
And just a reminder, the meeting, as always, is being live streamed on YouTube.
Okay. So do we have any, we're gonna start with public comments now?
I believe so, yeah. Just general public comments, not project specific that you'll be considering today.
Okay.
If there are any of those.
Hello, I'm John Zlogar with the Johns Island Task Force. Actually, I've got comments on 3 projects, and rather than do it 3 times, I just do it once. So it's relative to the Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative, the Burden Creek Oakville project, and the Ravenswood project. We believe all 3 of those projects are really significant from the standpoint of their ecological, cultural, and historical significance. And the Johns Island Task Force endorses all 3 of those projects. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Back to you.
All right, we'll roll right into the staff update. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since our last meeting back in September, the program stats have changed very little, with just the one Mount Pleasant project being approved last cycle. One project was withdrawn, and then we also issued a few small refunds for projects where balances were remaining but have been completed. So we have a total of 179 Greenbelt projects, and you can see the breakdown there between rural and urban. 57 of those are conservation easements, 116 fee simple, and 6 minor improvement projects for a total of over 23,000 acres protected. And you can see those breakdowns there. I won't read each one of those. Total funds awarded, $122.6 million, with just under $28 million for conservation easements, just over $94 million in fee simple acquisition, and $500,000 for standalone minor improvement only projects. This is coming at average cost of $5,230 per acre, with conservation easements being a little over $1,700 per acre, and fee simple just under $14,000 per acre. And then there's the breakdown of urban and rural. Match provided is a total of almost $158 million throughout the life of the program, and that's generating 129% in match. Public access, as a reminder, this does include the Charleston County Parks and Rec Commission properties as part of their initial allocation from the very first sales tax. And that totals 10,900 acres, or 43% of all Greenbelt properties do have some degree of public access. And we've awarded just under $139 million for public access projects. And about a year or 2 ago, we started tracking what we call minority lands. And these are projects that occur in any of these areas that are denoted below. And we've contributed $51 million towards minority lands funding and 3,233 acres. So far in 2022, Pappy's Island 2 has been the only project to close. That just closed a few weeks ago. And that will be transferred from OSI over to the National Fish and Wildlife Service and become part of the Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge. We've got several closings pending, as you can see there, and we anticipate Deerhead Oak will be the next one to close. Again, there's been little change since the last meeting to our goals. The change is reflected in that 1 additional acre for corridor projects, and that was the Mount Pleasant Way project, the Scanlonville project. And as of today, we've got just over $15.5 million in balance available for rural projects and $2.9 million in urban, for a total of just under $18.5 million. And just a reminder, these funds are all pay-as-you-go, meaning as those revenues come in, then they're made available to the program. These are not any bonded or borrowed funds. This slide shows urban funding currently available. The far right column shows the current balance for each municipality, as well as the urban unincorporated. And like last time, we've got 3 municipalities that do have a negative balance. Those are Charleston, Sullivan's Island, and then the unincorporated urban area. And of course, even though some of the municipalities do have a deficit in their so-called account, they are not close to expending their projected lifetime allocation. As you can see, the total lifetime balance over there on the right, far right column. Situation for the urban unincorporated is a little bit more concerning, as only about 30% of the total lifetime allocation remains. This slide shows the impact should all projects being considered today be approved. I'm going to go through each column here. So for the rural funding, we've got 2 rural projects today, and we'll take up several more of those next week. But the total amount requested for rural today is about $3.3 million. If approved, it would leave a balance of just over $12 million. City of Isle of Palms is requesting $120,000. If approved, they would have just under $120,000 left in their account. City of Charleston, $463,000, and their negative balance would grow to $1.8 million should that project be approved. Urban unincorporated, just over $51,000, resulting in $5.1 million should that project be approved. And Mount Pleasant, $734,000, with about $1.3 million, assuming that is approved. So the total for all urban requests, which all of those are being heard today, there will be none of those next week, is $854,000, which would leave just over $2 million in the urban account should those projects be approved. And overall, the request today that you'll hear about is over $4.7 million, and if those are approved, just under $14 million would be the balance remaining. One note on the Oakville Burden Creek project, that is a combination of funds between City of Charleston and Urban Unincorporated. And that breakout, that's broken down based on the percentage of area, because one of those parcels is actually in the City of Charleston's jurisdiction and one is Urban Unincorporated. So that's how those funds are broken out. The City of Charleston, according to Jason Kronsberg, is willing to cover the full amount should you all choose that that's the route you want to go. But wanted to show you here what it would be if you actually based it on the amount of land between Urban Unincorporated and City of Charleston. And we do have a mix of urban and rural projects under consideration today. And next week you will be considering 4 more rural projects. So I just wanted to provide a breakdown of the full impact if all the rural projects are approved. So Ravenswood and Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative is 1.5 and 1.8 million. And then next week you'll hear about just over 500,000 in funding requests. So if all those rural projects are approved, there would be a balance of 11.6 million. All right, I will roll right into the projects, give you a quick summary of the applications that you'll be hearing about today. 2 in the rural area from Low Country Land Trust. One is Ravenswood. That request is 1.54 million. Low Country Land Trust and Lacuna Corporation are partnering on the Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative application for a request of 1.84 million. Under our urban category, City of Isle of Palms is requesting minor improvement only funding for an ADA walkover at 34A beach access. And the total amount of Greenbelt funds would be $120,000. And another project from Low Country Land Trust, the Oakville Burden Creek Conservation Easement, and the request there is for $514,000. And Mount Pleasant Way, the Whipple Trail, and the request is for $734,000. And we'll go ahead and start with the project presentation section, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor for the first two. First two is going to be Oakville. And I'm going to step aside. Okay, do you want me to go over the guidelines maybe?
If one of you would just remind everybody of how our presentation and project consideration process works, that would be great.
We're going to do it this way. The subcommittee will hear the applicant's presentation. Subcommittee may ask questions of the applicant, but shall not debate the project between members at this time. Subcommittee will hear from the public regarding the particular project being considered. Anyone wishing to speak must sign up and are allowed 2 minutes to speak. The subcommittee shall not enter into any discourse with the public. The chair will entertain a motion from the subcommittee regarding the project. Once a motion has been made and a second, the subcommittee may discuss the project. Motion options are to approve with or without conditions or changes, deny or defer to a later meeting pending additional information. Those are our guidelines. So I'm going to step out. Let me know. All y'all's.
All right, Mr. Chairman, thank you. First project will be Burden Creek, Oakville, Low Country Land Trust.
Okay, while Ms. Olson from Low Country Land Trust is coming up to give her presentation, I'm going to give you another real quick overview. Again, this is a conservation easement. Part of it, is inside the urban growth boundary. The request is for $514,000, and they are offering an 857% match on this project, which is over $4.4 million. Just to orient you to the project, the parcel is shown in red. It doesn't quite include the eastern ends of this parcel, but I had no way to break that out because those are marsh. But it's located just off of River Road, and then this is the Stono River here, with James Island County Park being across the river over on James Island. And I'll just get Ms. Olson's slide up, and she can take it from here. Yeah, that's good.
Good morning. Thank you all for this opportunity to speak. My name is Natalie Olson. I'm the Sea Islands Program Director at the Low Country Land Trust. I will be presenting on the Oakville Burden Creek application, as well as the Ravenswood application. Before I start, I wanted to just briefly mention the public support that has been generated for the Low Country Land Trust applications that are before you this morning. A number of organizations and groups that represent citizens and stakeholders on the island have submitted letters in support of the project, as well as individuals and neighbors that live next door. Some of the groups include the Johns Island Council, the Johns Island Task Force, the Center for Heirs Property and Preservation, the Coastal Conservation League, the Open Space Institute, the Seabrook Island Green Space Conservancy, and the Preservation Society of Charleston. So our first project today is the Oakville Burden Creek project. This project is a shared priority among the community, conservation organizations, the Charleston County Aviation Authority, which is the neighbor to the south, the City of Charleston, which passed a resolution in support of the project last year, and the South Carolina Conservation Bank, which approved a grant of funds for this project late last year. It's also a great example of investing in community safety and nature-based flood mitigation, as well as protecting water quality, wildlife habitat, and rural areas from the threat of overdevelopment. As you can see on this map here, orienting us a little bit, it zoomed out from what Eric just showed us. The Oakville Burden Creek property is in pink there in the middle. The Johns Island Airport is directly south of it. You can see the Stono and the James Island County Park. The photo on the right is looking out across the salt marsh from the edge of the property towards the James Island County Park and Dill Sanctuary there. So this project is a total of 94.1 acres. 83 of those are in the city of Charleston in light blue. 10.98 are in light green there in unincorporated Charleston County. The current zoning is R4 and light industrial. Over a number of years, there have been a lot of different residential developments that have been proposed for this property, and the most recent of which was so imminent of a threat that the Charleston County Aviation Authority had to purchase the property for $7.7 million late last year to safeguard the opportunity to protect it. And so we are very appreciative that they were able to do that and set the stage for this type of opportunity to protect the property in perpetuity. As you can see from these numbers, this project is very highly leveraged, with the conservation easement value being $4.9 million and a landowner donation of $3.9 million. The grant awarded from the Conservation Bank late last year was $500,000, and our request for Greenbelt funds is $514,870. And Eric mentioned earlier the split and the city of Charleston's willingness to assume those funds. And here I'll just say that I agree. I think it's appropriate to take the city of Charleston funds for this project, and I'll get into that a little bit more later, but a majority of the project is in the city of Charleston, and I think this fits squarely within their priorities and plans, so it's a good fit for their funds. The Greenbelt price per acre on this property is a little over $5,000, and the match is 857%. As you can see, the blue line on that map is the urban growth boundary. That's a key thing about this project, is that it is located basically at the edge of the urban growth boundary. And so a dense residential development on the rural edge of the county is the risk that we would be avoiding with this project. So these are just a couple of quick shots of some aerials that were included in the application. You can see there's a rural residential neighborhood that borders this property to the north, and then to the south you can start to see the Johns Island Airport property. The land cover map shows that there's a lot of uplands on the property, about 75 acres of uplands, and there's over 16 acres of freshwater wetlands on the property. Here are the terms of the conservation easement. We've got 0 subdivisions and 0 residences, which is just incredible for a conservation easement project. The impervious surface limit is about roughly 1% of highland. There would be significant tree protections, a river buffer, wetland buffer. Ponds would be limited to 3 acres, no commercial mining, no dirt taken off the property. There would be one new road allowed, and that would just be purely for access to the neighboring airport property. And then 9 residential structures would be limited to the impervious surface limit, and they would be limited to things like passive outdoor recreation and land management equipment storage type structures. Photo on the right there is just a photo of some of the uplands that are on the property. So the map here on the left shows projections for sea level rise, and the property is low-lying, and as you can see would be impacted by that. With the restrictions that I just outlined that would be in the conservation easement, there are a number of public benefits that would be guaranteed in perpetuity with this project. The first and foremost, and perhaps the most obvious, is the hazard reduction in public safety. This is both in relation to the airport. There are FAA buffer requirements and all sorts of risks that come along with building and housing people directly adjacent to airports, and so buffering that industrial use would be very beneficial. And also it reduces the risk with developing in flood-prone areas. Not only would any development on this property be impacted because it's so low-lying, but the neighbors next door would absolutely be impacted as well if it were developed. We've also got urban resource protection, so that's things like preserving water quality, water filtration, view preservation along the Stono River. We mentioned earlier that this is across the Stono from the James Island County Park and the Dill Sanctuary, and so this undisturbed shoreline would provide an incredible habitat for many different species, and it creates a sense of place as you're going down the Stono and seeing a natural shoreline where you can fish and paddleboard and kayak. It would really be a special thing for this county. So let's see, we've also got wildlife protection. I mentioned an array of plants and animals that are on this property in that marsh area, and community identity and character. Johns Island is rural. It's still rural, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes, and this is the exact kind of project that we need to continue to be doing on Johns Island to protect the character of those communities. If we allow urban sprawl to take over the island, then it will look and feel like a very different place, and the people that are there now won't be able to stay there. And so this would provide some relief from urban sprawl up against the urban growth boundary. The map that you see on the left here is a map of marsh migration, and then the photos on the right, they're a little bit darker, but the photo on the top is the marsh, there is the forest that is right along the salt marsh. You can see it looks a little bit different than the forest that is more inland on the property. And so what we're trying to show here is the value of protecting uplands next to salt marsh. While the salt marsh is not included in this easement, protecting those uplands provides a space for that habitat to continue to exist as ecosystems change and sea levels rise. Public support, I mentioned earlier, there are lots of letters and emails. If y'all haven't had a chance to read those yet, I encourage you to, and hopefully they continue to come in as these projects move through the process. This is a screenshot of some of the media coverage that has happened over the years. There was a lot of opposition to the various developments on the property, and then a lot of support shown as protection became more of a real future for Oakville. On the left is the resolution that was passed by the City of Charleston in support of this application, and I wanted to close this Oakville overview by reading a part of the resolution that is just below what I have screenshotted there, because I think it emphasizes how well this fits in with the goals of the City of Charleston funds, but it also kind of summarizes, I think, all the key benefits of this project. So the city resolution says, this application and its intended goals are consistent with the city-adopted 2019 Dutch Dialogue's final report, the Dutch Dialogue's land use recommendations for Johns Island, the 2021 land and water analysis for the 2021 update of the City of Charleston Comp Plan, the draft City of Charleston Comp Plan, and the 2019 City of Charleston flooding and sea level rise strategy. Whereas the city desires to support the project, the protection of the Oakville tract, so that upon placement of a conservation easement, the property shall be perpetually protected as open space and shall act as critical nature-based flood mitigation in the Burden Creek watershed, protect wildlife habitat and water quality, preserve Johns Island's unique cultural and historic resources, and help ensure the safety and quality of life of the citizens, residents, and visitors of Charleston County. So I think that's a great summary to end on, so I can close Oakville and see if y'all have questions about this specific project.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. We'll open it up to the subcommittee and members if they have any questions on this particular project of Ms. Olson.
Hey, so how many houses under the current zoning regulations could be built on this land?
Over 200.
Thank you.
Over 200. That was the latest proposal from the developer.
Good?
Natalie, can you talk a little bit about the Dutch dialogues, why this property and that flood mitigation aspect of it works in terms of that whole process of resilience?
Sure, sure. So this property was identified and as it explained in the city resolution, that it's consistent with the Dutch Dialogue's 2019 final report and the land use recommendations for Johns Island. And essentially the point there is that Charleston County is very familiar with flooding. And we're very familiar with not only the flooding that's impacting existing residents, but this flooding that is exacerbated when we're building in low-lying areas. And so that's part of the reason why we have such strict and great zoning in Charleston County, is because we know that there are appropriate places to put houses and businesses and traffic, and there are not appropriate places. And this is one of the not appropriate places. Most of the property is incredibly low-lying, has wetlands throughout, it's on the edge of the Stono, and so if we continue to build, if we pave over the uplands that are right next to the salt marsh, and we continue to eliminate the shoreline of Johns Island, I mean, most of Johns Island is private, especially the shoreline, is privately owned, and there are houses on them and docks. And so if that's where we continue to put people in infrastructure away from services, then all we're doing is increasing the cost to the county and the risks to the citizens. And so I think the kind of overarching point of those recommendations is that there are right places to build things, and there are bad places to build things, and this is one of the bad places to build things. Did that answer your question?
That's
a little
very
bit?
helpful, thank you.
Ray, you have any questions?
Well, there's nothing for Ms. Olson. And what I'm trying to weigh between my mind is a split between the city and the unincorporated. I'm just fussing with myself internally right now.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have any questions, Ms. Olson? Okay, we'll move to the next part, public comment on this particular project. I don't see any on the sheet other than what we've already heard. All right, thank you very much. Good presentation. For the subcommittee, we'll now move to the step where we'll entertain a motion so we can have discussion, if anyone has one. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would make a motion to approve this project with the accepting the offer for the city to fund the entire project.
Okay. Second, okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Elizabeth?
So just to kind of elaborate on that, and Ray, open up the conversation a little bit about this funding. We've been talking a lot about forward funding, and we don't, in the full committee, and this currently subcommittee is operating under existing rules, but we have had issues with that. It is an issue, and particularly, as you mentioned, Eric, in your preliminary presentation on where we are, urban unincorporated is the one that is probably, but it's one of the smallest, but it's also one of the, it's forward spent as much as anybody. Due to the nature of this project and that most of it is in the city and the city's allocation, I just want to affirm and appreciate the city's offer to actually cover the whole thing and not put the urban unincorporated residual funding at further risk. So that is kind of my rationale for offering that, and I really, as the motion, but I really appreciate the city taking that initiative, much like Mount Pleasant had done with Boone Hall, to offer their funds to cover that, so it isn't an issue in this. So that's really what I wanted to say, and how I feel that that's a good resolution for this.
Thank you. Ray?
Well, it's just like I'm just looking down toward the future, and I know we're getting ready to make some application for some projects. And I would just hope the subcommittee and the Greenbelt Committee will not take into account this deficit or not if we exceed whatever the deficit becomes when that happens, because I don't think that would be fair to us. We've been approving these projects on a very routine basis. I know that falls to Charleston County to figure out, but I would hope that wouldn't be a detriment to my community when we do come forward with some projects.
All right,
And
thank you.
I'll be prepared to support this.
Okay. Nora? Okay. Okay, the motion is to approve this project with Charleston picking up the full cost of it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oppose? Okay, motion passes. Yes,
Can I
ma'am.
just say one thing? This is just for the record. I just want to commend this project. It's an example of the kind of things that I think we hold as priorities: the collaboration, the leverage, the multifaceted benefits, the clear community support for this, and it's encouraging to see an application come in like that. So.
Noted, thank you. Okay, our next project is going to be Ravenswood. Ms. Olson will do that after Eric gives us the overview. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Just another quick overview. Again, Low Country Land Trust is applying for funds for a conservation easement, and that request is for $1.54 million with just over 100% match. You can see the property outlined in red again here, and this is Main Road on Johns Island, just to give you a general idea of where this is located. And then I will go ahead and turn it back over to Natalie.
All right, thank you all. I'm very excited to present the Ravenswood application here. So we just got oriented a little bit, but here's a slightly zoomed out version of that map. The Ravenswood property is in bright pink and outlined in black there in the center. As you can see, there are protected property across the Stono and then to the south of it, a little bit on Johns Island, and then a lot more. The red parcels are privately protected parcels on Wadmalaw Island. But you can also see, just slightly on that map, it's a little bit tough to tell, but Maybank Highway is coming in there on the right, and you can see the urban growth as it's coming onto Johns Island, and then there's a blank spot in between the urban growth and Ravenswood where the former McLeod lumber tract is now cleared for a subdivision. And so just kind of orienting us to the rural nature of this project, but how close it is to the urban growth. At over 700 acres, Ravenswood is the third largest undeveloped, unprotected property under single ownership on Johns Island. It is on the northeastern side of the island, outside of the urban growth boundary. It drains into both the Stono River and a tributary of Church Creek. It's viewable by the public along a vast stretch of the Stono River and along Chisholm Road, and it currently anchors the rural identity of that part of the island. All right, so we just mentioned it's 711.87 acres. The project is a total of 5 TMS parcels. You can see them there, the easement boundary outlined in yellow. It does not include the salt marsh portion of the TMS number ending in 18, but it includes the stuff there outlined in yellow. It's currently zoned combination of AGR and AG8, which is 1 house per acre and 1 house per 8 acres. So before I get into those numbers, a little bit of context, because I've got an update on one of those numbers there. So a preliminary appraisal was done for the Ravenswood project in January of 2021, and that's the preliminary appraisal that was included in our application and the numbers that are up here on the slide. We've been in the process of getting that appraisal updated. We received it yesterday afternoon, so it was not in time to change these slide numbers, but I'm happy to report that updated information to you all today. There's just a slight adjustment in the value of the conservation easement. It's the preliminary report has it at $3.342 million instead of 3.77. But that doesn't change our ask. It lowers the landowner donation to 1.217 in the greenbelt match to 120%, but that's still over 100%. And we still think that this is a fantastic investment. So our greenbelt fund request will remain $1.54 million from the rural funds, and we have an application currently in to the South Carolina Conservation Bank for matching funds for $625,000. So this is a land cover map of the property. There are 14 and a half acres of hammock islands. That's what you can see up on the top in orange there that extend out towards the Stono. There's 80 acres of wetlands on this property, which is an incredible amount of freshwater wetlands. There's a 30-acre freshwater pond, which you can see there in light blue, 258 acres of open agricultural land, and 329 acres of forested land. The photos on the right there, the top one is of an emergent wetland. That's sort of where the light green area is on the southwestern portion of the property. And that's actually the spot, if you weren't able to make it on the Greenbelt site visit while we were at this location, we had a perfectly timed bald eagle fly overhead that completed the picture here in the feel. The picture on the bottom is the tributary of Church Creek, so that's the drainage into the salt marsh on the southern half of the property there. For conservation easement terms for this project, there are 5 subdivided tracts with 5 residences and 3 docks. I'll say for context, I took a quick look at Google Earth on the stretch of the Stono River where Ravenswood is located. On the other side, it's across the river from the town of Hollywood Wide Awake Park, but it's also across from the Stono Ferry subdivision. And in the stretch of Ravenswood alone, I counted 40 docks from that subdivision. So what we're talking about on that same portion of the river on the other side where we have all that beautiful salt marsh, that would limit that to 3 docks as compared to 40 across the river, just for some context. Impervious surface limit is around 0.25%. Again, significant tree protections, buffer along Chisholm Road, ponds limited to 60 acres, commercial uses are prohibited, roads, maintenance allowed, new roads for permitted uses only, non-residential structures subject to the impervious surface limit. Forest management would be according to best management practices and a forest management plan, and agricultural uses are allowed, but things like feedlots are prohibited. All right, so starting with the public benefits. These are a few other photos of sort of the interior of the property. Starting off with special landscape preservation. I can't really imagine many other projects that fit these descriptions of these public benefits better than Ravenswood does. I think a special landscape is a fantastic way to describe this property. There's agricultural lands preservation. The photo on the top left is some of the timber areas that have loblolly pine planted, so that's economic value. Also, community identity and character. You can see there are equestrian uses on the property. There's a barn there, tons of live oaks. There are lots of civic organizations that have hosted meetings. It's not this property, to be clear, is not public. It's not a public use property, but the community is very involved and engaged on a periodic basis. Like, for example, the Budweiser Clydesdale draft horses that came to visit Charleston stayed at Ravenswood when they were in town. There are not many setups around here that would have housed the setup of those Clydesdales, which is massive. And that's the kind of role that this property plays in the community. So continuing with some more public benefits here, urban resource protection. We noted in the beginning how close this is to urban areas, so providing functions like water filtration, protecting water quality, helping with water absorption, that sort of thing is definitely a public benefit here, especially on a property of this size. View preservation, this is another huge highlight for this project. The top 2 photos right there, the one on the left is the view of the marsh and the creeks along the Stono, and then the one on the right is of Chisholm Road. And both of those, the public, I think, has such an incredible opportunity when you're coming along the Stono. There are plenty of fishing guides that you'd ask that would say these creeks around Ravenswood are some of the best spots along this stretch of the river. And so for photographing wildlife and kayaking and all that sort of thing, it's a great opportunity for the public to experience protected land. And then similarly on Chisholm Road, lots of people pull off on the side of the road to take pictures of all the deer and the turkey that are moving across the Ravenswood property and across those fields that line Chisholm Road. There's a kestrel that sits on the wire pretty much every single time that you drive by. It's just, I share all that to say that this project is really about, it's about the look of Johns Island and the feel of Johns Island and that sense of community and that sense of place. The picture on the bottom there is of the 30-acre freshwater lake, and you can see a lot of geese lined up along the edge there. Wildlife protection, it would take me all day to list all the species that live on Ravenswood or move through Ravenswood. The climate, this is a climate resilience map, so that just gives you, again, another idea of migration space for tidal habitat here. Ravenswood is situated on the Southeast Coast Saltwater Paddling Trail, which is it's over 800 miles. It connects the Chesapeake Bay to the Georgia-Florida border. You can, on the map on the right there, I've highlighted some of the public access opportunities around Ravenswood. There's Wide Awake Park is right across the river, and then this is just down the Stono River from the Limehouse boat landing, which is a very popular spot to be launching boats and kayaks and stuff. And so there's lots of opportunities right around this stretch of Ravenswood for people to access and see these view sheds. Okay. So there's so much to talk about Ravenswood, but I will focus on two more highlights for y'all today. One of them I mentioned before, there's 80 acres of wetlands on this property. This is pulled from the Greenbelt Plan. Just the benefits of protecting wetlands for Charleston County and for wildlife and water quality. And that's a photograph of one of the wetlands on the property. And then also just a quick comment about history. Ravenswood is the site of the historic Johns Island landing of the Stono Ferry. And the Battle of Stono Ferry is just across the river. So this is an opportunity to protect a spot. You can see on that historic map there where Stono Ferry is circled. That's exactly where Ravenswood is. And so I think that's a really neat feature of this project. So I'll close by saying, I think with Ravenswood, it's not just about the benefit of keeping it as it is. It's about the idea of eliminating the risk that we would lose that forever. I mean, we've seen so much of Johns Island lost already, but there's still so much there. I mean, there's a huge, huge opportunity on the Sea Islands to preserve what makes that area so great and what makes everybody want to move out there. But it's not going to happen unless we protect landscape scale size areas like this for the wildlife to continue to thrive, for water quality to recharge, all of that stuff. It's one of those projects that, again, it's really about the look and feel of Johns Island, and I hope that y'all get a chance again to read the support letters. I think those share a lot of good context from neighbors and other stakeholders and stuff. But that's about it. I'll see if y'all have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Olson about the project? Elizabeth, I'm sorry, Ray. Go ahead.
Just a couple of quick questions. Was there a reason the saltwater marsh wasn't included?
Yes, the landowners are still working on acquiring a King's Grant for that property. And so because there is not currently a King's Grant on the property, it's not included within the easement. So that's why the easement boundary is there.
And as a part of the agreement with the land trust, when you talk about the economic value of the loblolly pine, I'm assuming that means it can be harvested sometime in the future. Is there a requirement to place it back if that does happen? I assume the proceeds stay with the families.
Yes, so there is a forest management plan that exists that would be controlling over the forestry practices, and so it would prevent things like you're saying, clear cutting the whole thing and not planting it back. And so the forestry activities would adhere to best management practices and the forest management plan, and the landowners have also started plans to replant longleaf, actually, in its place, longleaf pines, to establish that ecosystem in places where it's suited, where they currently have loblolly now too. And so as the property is timbered over time, the idea is to replace a lot of that with longleaf pine. But yes, those activities would be managed by that forest management plan and would have certain requirements that come with cutting and replacing it.
Thank you.
Elizabeth?
Natalie, you talked about the myriad public benefits of the property, of conserving this property, and you touched upon the Clydesdale, the community engagement. Can you talk a little bit more about possible public enjoyment of the property, even though it's private lands, and how this family views that?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of public access, I mean, the first point that I've shared some about is how many points of access the public has without actually getting on the property. Driving down Chisholm, I mean, there's over a mile of Chisholm Road frontage, which is a road that whole side of the island uses every single day. And then there's over 3 miles of marsh frontage. And so that entire expanse of miles of area, that's places where the public can view and enjoy the rural nature of this property without there being public access. And I did mention civic groups, community groups. The family has hosted a number of youth hunting days. There are tons and tons of kids that have gotten their first deer on Ravenswood. A lot of local organizations have been able to use that barn for their gatherings. And another thing about the Stono Ferry, the landowners have expressed interest in inviting educational groups out there to do some archaeology digs and kind of see what's still there in terms of history. And so I think overall this is the type of property that if we're successful in these protections, then that asset will be there forever for the community. And I think even without the specific public access component of it, there's just a crazy number of benefits, including the fact that there are lots of people in the community that have been on the property and that have been able to use and enjoy it. But I think the real highlight there in terms of public benefit is how much the public, you can see it and you can fish and you can take pictures and I think that's really unique, especially when we're talking about landscape size projects and big ecologically significant projects like this. A lot of times they're down some dirt road and, which is good also. But I think here it's just such a great combination of it influencing this community and being seen by this community so much that you'd really see that value if we were able to protect it.
Thank you.
I got one question. You showed us the view from Chisholm Road. What's on the other side of Chisholm Road from the property? Do you know what's going on with that?
Let me see where you're talking about here. So,
The road where you're taking the picture, if you're taking it the side that you're on, is that developed or is that also still
so if you
undeveloped?
see it, right, so if you see on the easement map, both sides of the road have the easement. So there's a small parcel that's not owned by the landowner south of Chisholm Road, that rectangle there that's south of Chisholm Road that's carved out of the easement, that is not owned by the landowners. And then the smaller parcels that are across the street from there are a couple of houses that are carved out of that part of the easement. But you can see that the bulk of the stretch of Chisholm Road that this property is on, there would be an easement on both sides.
Good.
And right now it looks much like those pictures, like a field with forestry in the background, some trees, a few smaller ag structures, and then there's sort of more smaller lots kind of on either side of the property.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions for Ms. Olson? Okay, public comment? I don't have any, but on the list, but in case someone came in late that would like to make comment. Okay, committee. Any, I guess I would entertain a motion.
Recommend approval.
A motion to recommend from Ray? Do I have a second? Second from Elizabeth. Any discussion? Anybody? All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 Oppose? The ayes have it. Recommended to be approved. We can let the chairman back in now. He can take over the chair.
We are waiting on the chairman. I'll just briefly go ahead and get started here with the overview. So, next project application is another one from Low Country Land Trust and partner Lacuna Corporation. It's the Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative. This property is located adjacent to Highway 17. If you're coming from Charleston this way, it's on the right-hand side just as you cross the Wallace River Bridge and before the highway splits off towards Hollywood there. It is a fee simple application in the rural area for 19.7 acres, and the request is for just over 1.8 million in rural funding. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tyler Grespin with David Ray, Low Country Land Trust. We get you queued up here, David.
Good morning, subcommittee members. Thank you for talking with us about our projects this morning. I do want to mention, since Eric mentioned him, Tyler Grespin, my colleague, is here as well and has worked on this project. And as you all know from recent meetings, the East Cooper Land Trust and Low Country Land Trust have now merged. And so we're working together, and our work will include more and more of the kind of community conservation projects that East Cooper Land Trust has had as a hallmark of their work. And this is a great example of it. I want to also mention that, as Eric mentioned, one of our partners in this project is Lacuna Corporation, which is an organization that is been around since 2005. They are a lean and mean operation. They're able to be very nimble in ways that sometimes larger organizations and governments aren't able to. They were formed to be able to take advantage of opportunities to secure lands that are important to conservation ahead of the ability of others to produce the final takeout of the project. And that's exactly what they've been able to do here. Were it not for a unavoidable conflict, Mike McShane, who is on the board of that organization, would be here as well to present to you, and he will appear at future meetings. But we're grateful for them being able to step in at a critical time in this project and help secure the property. The other partner, if you will, that I want to mention in this is the South Carolina Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative itself, which is the seller and owner of the property. But it's a really amazing organization and an amazing story in itself, their ownership of the property. And this really gets at the why this place is so important and why it's important enough to warrant the expenditure of Greenbelt funds in the way that we're asking. This organization was formed in the late 1960s. It is a cooperative of African-American farmers from 5 different sea islands, and they came together to pool their produce and to create value added by bringing it together so that they could access markets throughout the country and even into Canada to sell their produce from their farms and get fair prices for it. So it's an incredible story of people in an underdog position taking control of their own destiny and being proactive. As they were working, they secured this property in the early 70s. So they've owned it for 50 years now, and it's a place where they have come together to sell their product. It has occasionally served as a farmer's market in the past. And one of the things that was discovered about it during the course of their ownership is that it is a site that was extremely important in the Stono Rebellion of 1739, where a group of slaves essentially said, we're seeking freedom and we're going to take control of our destiny. And they were marching towards what they hoped would be freedom. And this is one of the places that they passed in that process. And I'll show you some slides. There's actually some relics from that time, and there are some that are also with the Charleston Museum that relate to that time period. But why is it such a big privilege and honor for us to get to work on this project? One is it's a place that people in Charleston County, many, many people see every day, or if not every day, every time they go to travel to the southern part of Charleston County. You've seen it as you're driving along Highway 17, you pass over Rantol's Creek, then you pass over the Wallace River, and the first property on your right is this property. And you might not realize the significance, but for the fact that what I first noticed when I passed it was the historical marker for the Stono Rebellion. And that was placed back in the early 2000s to recognize that this site is actually listed as a National Historic Landmark by the federal government. So this story of the Stono Rebellion can be told very well from this place that was part of what happened, and that's part of the vision for the future of the property. The other story that I think is incredibly compelling and inspiring is the story of the cooperative itself, of them taking their destiny into their hands, their own hands, and taking charge of how they were going to sell their produce. A group of humble, small farmers from across the Sea Islands doing that. I think that's an amazing story and an inspiration for the future, and that's what we want this property to serve as for the future. The other thing is, as you can see from this photo, it's right on the Wallace River. The Wallace River is deep water. It's a great opportunity for people to access the water. We've heard time and time again that people in Charleston County feel like there's not enough places for them to access the water, either for fishing and crabbing or for paddling. We are not proposing that this site become a boat ramp per se, but a place where people can put paddlecraft in. So I'll talk a little bit more about that as we scroll through these slides, but here you can see the makeup of the property of the highland and the salt marsh. And there is a beautiful view out the back of this property over the salt marsh and into the surrounding area. A couple more maps just showing the land cover, infrared photo. Just so happens that the farmers bought property that has a lot of prime farmland soil on it. One of the future uses potentially could be for some sort of community gardening. We would be leaving that use open for the future, as well as for the potential for there to be farmers markets, as there have been from time to time in the past. You can see this, this map shows the setting. And a couple of things I want to point out. The properties that you see in red are existing Low Country Land Trust conservation easements. There's also a purple one off on the right-hand side. That's a property that actually the Low Country Land Trust has acquired. And we're going to be looking at how to use that property, potentially another point for public access to the water in the future. The green properties, the one on the top closest to the star where this property is Caw, which is one of the gems of the Charleston County Parks and Recreation Commission system. It's only a mile as the crow flies from this property, and it's connected by the waterways. And then to the south of that is Dungannon Wildlife Management Area, and that is the College of Charleston Foundation Stono Preserve, which is the red property to the south of that. So it lies in the middle of a conservation landscape. It's also what I would call the gateway to southern Charleston County. As you cross those waterways, you look out over those expanses, this is one of the first things you see as you're headed south towards the Ace Basin, towards these other areas of Charleston County that we all appreciate for their rural nature. And we want to keep it open. One of the things that could happen to this property is it could become a hotel or condominiums or apartments. It's very attractive for those because it's got that deep water next to it. It's got the beautiful views out the back. And it's zoned general commercial, so these uses could be made of it. Just in terms of the paddlecraft, Natalie showed you the map with regard to Ravenswood. This is in the same general area, and the Blue Trail idea could well apply to this property as well. The Bulow landing on Rantol's Creek is not far from here. I actually, myself, as this project started, paddled from the Limehouse boat ramp on Johns Island to this property, and it was just a gorgeous, beautiful paddle. I was so excited by the time I got there. I went the same distance further into the Wallace River and the marshland, and it turned into a wilderness. So the ability to give people access to that wilderness through paddling, I think is just an amazing opportunity here. It's another map showing the same thing without the aerial photo. Our goals really here, one is, as I said, to prevent the worst case where this might just become a parking lot with large apartment buildings or condo buildings on it. But even more so, in the positive sense, is to preserve a place where we can tell the story very tangibly of the Stono Rebellion and what the meaning of that is to our people. To preserve what I think is the other great story about the Sea Island Small Farmers Cooperative, and then again, to give people access to the water. As I said, it's zone commercial. It's very valuable property. The appraisal is in your, value is in your documentation. We've actually learned that they've had offers since we struck a deal with them. We do have this property under contract, Lacuna does, and they've had offers above the level that we have secured that contract for. So for whatever that's worth, I think it's important to note that there is a significant threat to this property. We don't have a lot of match to this project, and I'll just say that. You can see it in your materials. Lacuna is going to cover much of the transaction costs. We have put in for some transaction costs, but they're going to cover some of them themselves. We may be able to secure some match, but we don't know that, and we didn't know it with enough assurance to feel like we could put it in the application right now. I think by the time the GAB meets, we may be able to tell you that we've got match on the order possibly of $200,000 for this project, but this is where we are right now. So just full disclosure on that. I mentioned it's a registered National Historic Landmark. You can't see it here, but this is the official plaque from the federal government noting that. These are the signs about the Stono Rebellion that you've probably seen alongside the road, but driven by too quickly to be able to read. Our hope is we'll provide an opportunity for people to stop and read it and read more about these meaningful aspects of the property. This is a cellar that dates back to colonial times that was discovered on the property and was dug out, and there were artifacts that are in the Charleston Museum, and it's believed that this well could be one of the structures that was on the property at the time of the Stono Rebellion. You've probably noticed that there's some aging infrastructure on this property if you've driven by it. One of them is this area where goods were sold and packed that's covered by a metal roof. It's collapsing now. We would definitely remove that before inviting the public onto the property. There's a few other buildings. There's 3 other buildings. What we have said is that we are proposing no more than the square footage of the buildings that are currently on the property. I've mentioned much of this. We would be looking to get people to the water. There'd be areas for people to walk and enjoy the scenic view shed, and to fish and to learn about the history of this place and of the ecosystems that relate to this place. going to keep moving along for time's sake. The way this project is set up, because of the situation of the owners, so I mentioned that they were farmers 50 years ago who started this cooperative. They are the people who are still remaining in the cooperative are in their 80s and 90s. And they, frankly, they love this place. They have crafted a vision for the place, actually, and had a USDA architect draw up plans for public gathering space, for a market, farmer's market, a nursery, community garden, water access. They just, at this point, don't have the energy to make that vision a reality. And they don't have the energy or the money, frankly, to keep owning the property because the property taxes are not under any kind of agricultural exemption. They're paying something on the order of $14,000 a year. And so they just can't afford to keep the property. We needed to act in order to secure the property. So it's actually going to be purchased ahead of a grant being made. Again, full disclosure, and we recognize that there is a little bit of a risk in that. But we've disclosed that from the beginning, and our hope is that the Greenbelt program will still find this project worthy of support. So it will be purchased by Lacuna, and the intent is for the Low Country Land Trust to ultimately hold the either conservation easement or deed restrictions on the property that will limit the future use to the things that we've described in our application and that would be in the grant agreement that would relate to the funding being provided. And our ultimate hope is that this property will be owned or managed by the Parks and Recreation Commission. So far, they've not moved through their process of getting all their approvals to say for sure that that can happen. We have gotten very positive feedback from David Bennett, the executive director of PRC, and so we're hopeful that that will be the case. We think it's a great opportunity to help them meet their mission, not just of having large parks, but also of helping people get to the water, and they do that in many other places in Charleston County. And because this is so close to Kaw, part of the idea is that this could essentially be sort of a satellite of Kaw that might be managed by the staff at Kaw because it's so close. So that may develop also as this works its way through the grant process, but wanted to make you aware of what we're trying to accomplish with this. In any case, in some form or fashion, we will provide the public the opportunity to come on this property. It just may be that the nature and frequency of that is different depending on who the ultimate future owner and manager of the property is. So I'm going to just move over to this, which is this property is in that area where Hollywood and Ravenel kind of mix up, and it's actually in the town of Hollywood. Interestingly enough, it has an address of Ravenel. But as you can see from this slide and in your materials, hopefully, we have gotten support for this project from the mayors of both Hollywood and Ravenel, and as well as many others in the public voicing their support. And we're grateful to the Johns Island Task Force for supporting this as well. So again, I've mentioned the initial project partners and our hope for partners, the Conservation Bank, potentially with a grant to this, and the Parks and Recreation Commission. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have. Yes.
And forgive me if I missed this, but if you get an additional $200,000 match, does the ask of the Greenbelt come down by that amount?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Elizabeth?
Okay. Yeah, so David, the idea is for this to go to the county parks and it have an easement or some protective covenants that the land trust would enforce. A couple of things in terms of public accessibility, actually, where would parking go, that kind of thing? I know you haven't done a master plan yet and that's there, but just kind of thinking through what you conserve and what you actually allow for public impact.
Good question. I think one thing we would do would be to look at the plans, again, that they had done back in 2008 by the USDA, because part of that idea was to bring people on the property. So we'd probably start looking at that, and I honestly, I don't recall exactly where they placed that on the property. But what I would expect is it would be fairly close to the entry of the property, which is entered on the far side away from the Wallace River, so as to keep cars away from that portion, probably making sure that it's safe as cars enter and people are leaving and can walk onto the property. So I suspect it would probably be somewhere as you enter the property from that side of the property to the left and towards the woods, but then leaving a pathway for people to then walk along the woods or perhaps through them and getting a view over the marsh towards the waterfront. So that's my guess, but I can't speak officially as to what that
And then
would be.
the follow-up on that is kind of, I think I remember billboards.
That's right. Yeah, there's 2 billboards on the property. There is a lease for those billboards. The reason that the billboards are there is because, as you can imagine, as I mentioned, the taxes, the cooperative has needed to have some source of revenue to pay the taxes on the property. Our hope would be to, as soon as possible, no longer have the billboards on the property. We can't guarantee that. There is a right of renewal. There's a clause that relates to the potential for the billboard company to exercise an option to own the billboards on the site. So we're looking into whether or not that's something that would stick and would be a permanent feature of the property. I will say my own experience on the property, as you drive by, obviously you can see the billboards. You can be on the property and lose notice of the fact that those billboards are there. They're above your head. So I don't think it would interfere at all with the purposes of the project. It's not something we would prefer to be there, but it would not interfere with the intended uses of the project.
But if you had to sell them, they had first right of refusal to buy the billboards. Would that come into play with any deduction on the ask?
It's a good question. It's a good question. I'd have to think about that. I mean,
Because what I'm looking at is 300,000 an acre for Highland, just no match. I'm just talking out loud.
I can certainly look into that question and come back to you.
Anyone else?
At the site visit, we noticed there was a couple of small buildings, and one of the buildings, which is in pretty good shape, it was suggested that that be turned into a restroom, perhaps, for people who are kayaking, to be able to stop. Are you still planning to do that?
Well, we've not developed plans, as Elizabeth alluded to at this point, but bringing the public onto the property, I would think that would be something that we would want to do, to make sure that people have a place to do that rather than
Right.
in the woods somewhere. So I would expect that to be part of the planning for the property.
And if the Parks Department is not able to manage this property, what would you do then?
Well, obviously, we'd look for alternatives, and one might be that the land trust provides periodic access to the property. We're not set up like PRC to provide daily access to properties. It may be on a model similar to the town of Meggetts Park, which is open on the weekends, but not during the week. We're not exactly sure what the alternative might be, but we would be looking either for another partner that might be able to run the property, or to take that on and determine what kind of a schedule we could provide that on.
Any other questions?
Do you think you'd be in a position to provide any clarity on a plan for public access by, I don't know, say 90 days or 6 months? Or is there any time frame you could provide where we could make an approval to accept based on a plan so that we can be assured of execution,
Especially this being fee simple.
especially with the price?
We can certainly try. I will go back and confer with the other partners see if we're able to provide that during the process of your consideration. I don't have that timeline right now,
No,
otherwise
I
would,
know,
yeah.
but I was just hoping for maybe a guess on what time you would need. Is it 90 days, is it 6 months? So that I could make an amendment based on that.
Honestly, I think probably something on the order of 6 months is more likely than 90 days. But that's a guess. So I would need to confer further with our partners.
Taylor?
The relationship with the company who bought it, Lacuna, is there an agreement that your organization would pay that back, or what's the expectation from Lacuna's point of view? Can they wait 6 months, or?
Let me make sure I understand your question. Did you say the company that bought Lacuna?
No. Lacuna itself that bought the property.
Right.
They own the property right now. It's deeded to them, correct?
They don't own it yet.
don't
It's
own
under
it.
contract.
It's under
but
contract.
Closing is expected to occur this month.
Okay. And then the agreement is with Low Country Land Trust that you would go out and find the funds to reimburse them, fully reimburse them. And is there a
Well,
timeline on that? or-
They're actually a partner. I mean, they're actually a co-applicant on
Okay.
this. So as I mentioned, Mike would be here, but for a conflict today. We're partnering on this project, and the idea is that our role, Low Country Land Trust, is to ultimately hold the restrictions that would be enforced to effectuate the grant agreement requirements. Their role is to essentially step in as an interim owner from a conservation, mission,
Okay.
and to hold the property until a final outcome can be developed. So, the hope is that can happen sooner rather than later.
But right now, the land is protected, or will be, once they consummate the contract and close on the property.
That is the intention, that's right, yes. And their mission is conservation protection. But, I think the grant is critical to getting this done. And obviously, it's not our preference, and I know it's not your preference to make a move on property prior to getting a grant, but this is a situation where we felt that the threat was imminent enough that we needed to act. So the grant is critical to getting this project done.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Motions?
Well, we're gonna, public comment?
Well, sorry, public comment first.
Thank you. I'm Mike Hemmer. I'm with the town of Ravenel. I'm the town administrator. We wanted to reiterate our support for this project. And then I can also speak a little bit to the development pressure that is out there. Ravenel holds maybe the key to some of the development that could occur on this property, in that we have sewer capacity, and they would likely have to get to us. I don't think Hollywood has excess sewer capacity. And we have talked to property owners and businesses about this property, and we would prefer to see exactly what is being proposed. So just wanted to make that statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'll make a motion, and I just want to say up front, I think it's a wonderful project, and I really hope it works out. So I would motion to approve, subject to a plan for what public access exactly is. That's item number one. Item number two is clarity on the billboards, meaning at renewal, they're either removed, or if it has to happen that they're purchased, that money comes back to the Greenbelt. And then the third one is that the $200,000 grant is pursued. No, I'm gonna subtract that one. I don't want to make it subject to that. Just the first two. So I can repeat if you want. Let me repeat them.
Yes.
It is motion to accept based on a plan for public access related to the paddle access. And number two, clarity on the billboards, with the billboards either expiring and going away at renewal, or if they have to be sold, that the money comes back to Greenbelt.
Not public access from 17?
Or maybe that's.
Yeah, no public access from 17, why wouldn't you? A plan,
The first
Right.
part of that was just a plan for public access,
Right.
period. Does that not cover that?
no, you
Your
said
mind?
paddle.
No, well, that ends up in paddling access. But
Right.
yeah, you're,
Right. Access
General
from
public
17
access.
and from the water, from the road and the river. Is that fair enough? Some kind of plan showing public access from 17 and the water?
We'll do our best to get that to you.
And whatever you can find out about billboards.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Well, I think we need a second to that motion, first of all, before we enter into
Okay.
discussion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay.
Right up there.
All in favor?
Wait, we need to have discussion.
Go ahead.
I just want to ask Eric, this is for you, or a legal question, just about that, how it would work for reimbursement from any type of remuneration that would come from the billboard sale. How does that work into our policies?
So I would need to talk more with Mark on this, but in the past, when we've had, an interest in a Greenbelt property be acquired, whether it be a right-of-way or something like that, and funds are paid for that interest, then that money does go back into the same pot of the Greenbelt program. Would you consider this a similar situation, Mr. Bell?
Without seeing the details of whatever the billboards and their private agreement says, and what our ordinance says, that's a fair assessment at this time, but we'd have to look at what the actual wording and details would be when they're presented to us.
Is the wording of this motion, the way that we've explained that, adequate, or do we need to adjust that in any way for you to find that information out and for this to be approved and go forward with that condition?
I believe the motion is sufficient for the moment. Unfortunately, it is very difficult to force a party to sell or not to sell anything, because that is something that we don't control. So right now, all we're asking for is, can you please provide us some information going forward? And so I believe that this motion is sufficient to do that.
Or copies of that lease or first right of refusal to buy. Can you provide those from the billboard company?
Yeah, absolutely. We can provide you relevant documents. If I could just make a comment, if it's not out of order, just something for you to consider in this. One of the things that's going to be needed as we proceed to providing public access is finding the funds to make that happen. And it may be that if this does happen, which I hope it doesn't, but if there are proceeds from the sale of that billboards, that those funds could be used on the property to effectuate public access that we need. Obviously, we could search for other sources, but that would be a ready source of funding to do it. So just for your consideration.
if I could comment to that, and I maybe should have said this more clearly, that by listing it number one, my motion to accept the preferences for the billboards to go away at renewal. That would be I think that would be most consistent with the Greenbelt property. If they have to stay, then I think the Greenbelt should be repaid, given the price and given that there's not currently a match, and that the money should be found elsewhere for the public access. But that's the way I intended the motion, but I'm happy to amend it based on your comments.
Would you consider that either the billboard remuneration, if it has to go to Plan B, on that either be reimbursed to the Greenbelt or be reinvested in the public, accessibility of the project?
Yeah, but as a discussion point, given there's not a match currently, don't you think we should have another?
Well, I guess I'm kind of thinking in light of all the issues we've had in terms of opening up fee simple parcels and trying to optimize that. If that is a challenge, because of the unique public nature of this, the public community aspect of this, I personally would feel comfortable with it being reinvested in public accessibility of that. I think that the preference is that you would find other matches for that. It really sounds like that this is probably going to work out for it to go. You can't speak to this, David, but to be an annex or a satellite of Caw. And in that case, you're not dealing with that, and it would come back to the Greenbelt. But if you needed to have the funds from the billboard reinvested in the parcel because for some reason the county isn't going to do that, I would hate to see that be so restrictive that it would actually hurt the ability to have public access when it's a good project. That's just, I'm thinking about the level of restriction and opportunity on the applicant going forward.
Taylor?
I'm wondering, since we're going to meet next Thursday, right, Eric?
Yes, sir.
David, is this something that you could take back to your folks and to your staff and come up with what the actual lease of the billboards are and give us some options, your preferred option, but
Yeah,
then
show us
take in
some
mind
numbers.
what Beezer's also asking, as well as then, I mean, Beezer, are you looking just for a drawing of a dock on the side to show that, or what are you?
Well, just over the past few years of the being involved in the Greenbelt, one of the concerns that's come up most heatedly is delivery upon promises.
Right.
And pledges of public access or pledges of certain amenities that then don't come through or don't come through in a timely fashion. Not through ill will or anything. It just doesn't seem to happen sometimes.
Right.
And so it seems like if you apply a little bit of pressure to that, given the price, given the excellent nature of this project and the unbelievable possibilities of being a public amenity, I would just say let's get on with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thought there.
Well, if you came back in a week with the information on the billboards, and then how, you have two different ends here. One goes, the money goes there, the other goes into helping that become a reality, the public access more feasible to become. Is that something that you could do and bring back to us?
If you would like me to come back next week, I will do my best to collect as much information as I can.
So then that would mean, just a question for you, Taylor, what we'd be doing now is delaying the vote. Delaying the vote.
Draw the motion.
Draw the motion, delay the vote until next week with that additional information, and hopefully the applicant can come back with a recommended course of action that would address all the concerns and allow it to be supported.
Would that work for you, Beezer?
That works fine. That works fine. I thought the acceptance motion gave plenty of room for that, but that's fine. Yeah.
Go ahead.
First of all, I'd like to applaud the Low Country Land Trust and the Edisto Land Trust for their efforts to protect the beautiful areas on 17 down to Edisto. I know what you guys have done. And when I went to the site visit, I actually teared up when Mr. Nabinet was talking about the fact that they don't have anybody to follow them now. It's them. And it's kind of the last best chance to do this. But I am concerned about the lack of matching funds because that's always been something that we've turned down projects for
Yes.
low matching funds.
Especially when it's zero.
Well, what would happen if, with your partner, if, let's say you could only get $1 million, and then would that be a contribution from them? Would that be matching that they would do? Is that a possibility?
Honestly, I don't believe it is.
Okay.
I think we really need the full funding.
Okay.
And we hope to be able to split it with a match of the kind that I've stated. I just can't say that at this point. And given that it's a, particularly important place for Charleston County, we know it's an extraordinary ask, and we would not ask it for any other property or just any property. But this one is incredibly special and meaningful for Charleston County.
Well, I think we all up here agree with you. We're trying to keep it in how we've done business in the past, and
I think based on
We want
that,
you to-
I'm gonna stand by it. I'm gonna stand by the motion to accept with those two things. Y'all don't have to second it by any means, but I think we should get on with it because it's a wonderful project. I think a 6-month timeline or whatever for a public access plan is reasonable, and I think the billboard request is reasonable. We could amend it at the gap relative to what you're talking about, Elizabeth, for returning that money back
Yeah.
to the project if we want.
Well, what about amending that now?
Okay.
I
fine.
mean,
I'll
the
do it.
reason I'm saying that is because either we're going to go forward with your motion now, and I would like to leave that open because I think that it could hurt public access if the only thing between public access was 200,000. I'd like for it to stay invested if it couldn't come back to the green belt.
The only thing I don't like about that is it slightly undermines the preference to get rid of the billboards altogether. But,
No, I support leaving that in there.
okay.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just talking about that option.
Yeah.
And really, that's a legal question, it sounds like, when we look at that. It's not like that's going to be something we can control. They either have the right of first
Right,
refusal,
right.
or they either have a right of renewal, and that's purely legal. So I want to make sure we're addressing that.
We can't control that.
Yeah,
And you've said your preference is to get rid of the.
Absolutely.
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, but
So-
there's a difference between contract and want.
Sure. But just so you know, that is absolutely our preference. We would much rather
You
they
wish
not
for
be
them to
there.
go away.
If we went forward with yours, would the project then go on up to the GAB, and the GAB would take care of this? Okay, so they wouldn't have to come back here in 6 months or
They would have to come to the greater gap,
to the GAB? So when
I
their
think,
project comes to the.
right? No, they come back to some committee. Well, I can't remember. When they have the plan for the,
Mr. Chairman, I think the way that the motion was phrased to accept with these conditions, I think that's a little bit ambiguous, because does that mean we don't reimburse until they provided this information? And then what is acceptable information? Your recommendation will go to county council either way. Correct, Mark?
So then currently, and at the moment, nothing would come back to the subcommittee unless you guys
Defer.
hadn't asked him to defer to come back to you specifically. At the moment, should this motion pass, and it will go before the full committee. And then at the full committee, the committee will reevaluate and see whether or not they want to accept this current recommendation, whether they want to make their own recommendation. And whatever the full committee does will then go to county council.
So this motion,
there would be to defer, accept, defer, or deny, right?
Yep.
Those are 3 choices. And so really, the middle path of defer is the only thing you could do if you wanted it to come back to the gap. Is that correct?
Are you talking about the subcommittee or the full
No,
gap?
to the full gap.
At the full gab, the full gab, is able to defer, and if they need more information, but that would be a different motion than today.
You can accept with conditions though, right?
Yes,
Can?
that is correct.
Yes.
Okay.
My concern with that is, it seems like there's some pieces that need to be fleshed out here. And do you now want to get the whole GAB involved with that? Or could they come back here and see if we can get a more cleaner recommendation to the GAB
next week.
next week? Yeah.
I would agree with that, Beezer, just only because I feel like our job at the subcommittee is to give as much clarity and direction
To the next.
to the full committee, and then ultimately to county council. Given the timing of this closing coming up, we are creating more uncertainty by doing a conditional acceptance. And I think that actually creates more problems than we intend. It's an unintended consequence. If we just said, hey, let's delay, get the more information so we actually can have a more concrete recommendation, maybe we still do a conditional acceptance, but we have more information that would make that a clearer directive to them. And I think because we are meeting next week, we have the opportunity to do that. So it may be that your motion is exactly as it is. It's just allowing that information to be a part of that decision. I personally would like to see more information before I have a vote on that.
Okay. All right, I'll
Go
continue on
ahead.
that, I guess. I don't see it changing, but okay, that's fine.
It may
We'll,
not.
we'll move, if you're cool with that, David, we'd like to see you at the next meeting
Yeah.
relative to this.
Nora,
Oh, I was just going to suggest that we defer this until we have the information we've asked for today.
to next Thursday?
Yeah.
Well, we still have to act on Beazer's.
Just gotta go back to
motion,
Beazer.
right? And what is your motion exactly? Could you do it again?
He would be withdrawing it.
I think I'm withdrawing it and just asking for a little more information at our next meeting, if you're willing, David.
And maybe Mr. McShane could come then.
He may be here.
Might
Yeah,
be available.
yeah.
So, Mr. Moulton has withdrawn your motion. I think we need to withdraw the second as well.
Yes.
I'm happy to withdraw the second.
Okay. So now
We
the,
defer it to next Thursday.
Can I just make sure this is
Yeah,
too
I'm
nitty?
actually to defer next Thursday.
Is it delay or defer? I think that's just to delay the vote, isn't it? Technically, I just want to not get us,
Right? You got defer, deny, or approve.
Then the first fine, and so what you're doing, you are, postponing this matter to a date certain. The date certain will be next week, it's
Thursday.
Wednesday or Thursday.
Next Thursday.
yes.
so it's a deferral pending more information to be provided next Thursday.
That's correct.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. See you next Thursday.
Thank you for your consideration. I'll see you next
Okay,
Thursday.
next we got Town of Mount Pleasant.
All right, project from the town of Mount Pleasant is a Mount Pleasant Way, Whipple Trail segment of the Mount Pleasant Way, which is a multi-use path that'll connect various parts of Mount Pleasant. It is an urban corridor project, fee simple acquisition for about 6,300 linear feet of multi-use path along Whipple Trail. Town of Mount Pleasant is requesting over $700,000 and is proposing over $1 million match for that. Location is shown in red between Mathis Ferry Road and Long Point Road to the north. And now I'll cue up the presentation for Mr. James Aton, standing behind me here. Oh, forgot yours is already loaded in here, James. It's all yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for allowing us to present on the Whipple Trail segment in this go-around of the Greenbelt application. As was stated, my name is James Aton with the town of Mount Pleasant, obviously, and with the many hats that I wear, bike and pedestrian safety and infrastructure is one of the things that I deal with, so I'm happy to present and elaborate on any questions you may have about this specific project. I'd like to take a moment to highlight and show the appreciation of our staff to Eric Davis and his team through this application process. They were always there to answer questions, incredibly responsive, and I just think it warrants taking a second to show that appreciation. And then I would also be remiss if I didn't point out the town's team that took this effort under our wing here. Two members are not able to attend today. That's Christiane Farrell, Brad Morrison, and then we have Liz Boyles and Kristen Forbes here, who were instrumental in putting together this application. So a brief overview of sort of the agenda of this presentation. I think it's important that we start off just as we did in our last presentation to you last year, going over what is the Mount Pleasant Way project, detailing what that all encompasses and where the Whipple Trail project falls into that effort. So a lot of this information on these slides you have seen, but I think it's important again to highlight some of these issues here. So one of the important things to point out here is, we're pivoting from previous presentations from the hubs aspect of your Greenbelt plan to the spokes. That's what the Mount Pleasant Way is for the majority of it. And still to this date, just 13% of your goal has been met for the Greenway Corridor's target, with the most recent approval being the Scanlanville Prayer House Trail this past year. Again, the Mount Pleasant Way is a 35-mile plus separated use facility. That is those spokes that are part of y'all's plan. And it is the intent of the town of Mount Pleasant to spend all of our Greenbelt funds on Mount Pleasant Way. Some of the regional plans in the area to highlight that this project, specifically Whipple Trail, aligns with: Charleston County People to Park, East Coast Greenway, BCD COG's walk bike plan, and then of course obviously the Greenbelt plan vision. And in addition to those regional plans, there's the obvious ones that the town has undertaken, which include the comprehensive plan, which also has a subset of the LRTP, our long range transportation plan, of which Mount Pleasant Way is a part of. Then the Mount Pleasant Way master plan itself, which was completed and adopted back in 2021. And then just to highlight the efforts that the town has made thus far towards actually funding these projects for construction and installation. We've allocated over $700,000 thus far, pursuing grants like many others, some through the more typical funding sources of CTC and TST. I think it's worth mentioning that over the next 3 years, our town council has interimly approved $2.7 million to go towards the Mount Pleasant Way efforts. So we're very excited about that. And we're currently actually pursuing a RAISE grant for planning and engineering to the tune of about $7 to $8 million, which will help design and fund the construction of these segments like we're talking about today. So first off, I want to just show you a brief map here of the Mount Pleasant Way project. So this is the spine route. This is 20 miles of separated use facility that connects all of the town, connects our recreational uses, our educational, obviously the residential side of things, commercial, and allows access to historical, cultural areas, natural areas for viewing, all that are in line with the Greenbelt goals. So while the spine route itself, again, is the priority, it's 20 miles, the Whipple Trail section is just over 1 mile long. So if you take that into context, we're talking about 5% of the total spine route is what we're applying and asking for today. Additional networks shown here include the secondary routes as well as our quiet streets and greenbelts. Won't get into too much of this, but just to show you a quick graphic of the overall Mount Pleasant Way master plan routing. In addition to the master plan and some of the projects that have been worked on already, the town has been making efforts and strides to actually implement this. The most recent being the Park West Boulevard widening project, which included over 1.5 miles of 12-foot multi-use path, in addition to other existing facilities like Wonders Way that have been in place for a while. So the spine route is making way. We are making progress, and we hope to expand it further through your recommendation today. Quickly, secondary routes here. This isn't as important, but just again want to show you that the town is committed and has been spending money, and whether through our own pockets or through development requirements, to have this facility implemented. And then lastly, the greenway areas that have been in place, which somewhat tie to our application today in a way, including the Waterfront Gateway Trail and the Hog Island Gateway Trail. And then I also think it's important, even though we're talking mostly about the spokes portion of the Greenbelt plan, there are plans in place to include parklets, which, for reference, if you haven't heard that term, a parklet is just a small park. It's an area along a trail that you can stop and take view of nature, such as the Shim Creek Boardwalk area. Wonders Way has a lovely workout area at the base of the bridge. We have other attractions like the Farmers Market and other historical areas like the One Hand Sanders Park. So we intend to incorporate features like that as we move through this particular project, and I'll get into more details now on that. So the Whipple Trail project, this is the meat of the presentation today. Again, just wanted to give you an overview of the Mount Pleasant Way so you had a refresh on where this sits within that master plan. Again, as Eric described, it's a multi-use path plan that will connect from Long Point Road to the existing trail, 8-foot trail on Mathis Ferry Road. And I'll get into the specific details of what this trail will incorporate and intends to incorporate, but I wanted to first touch base on why did we choose this segment. We have 20 plus miles of spine route, an additional 15 plus miles of secondary greenway and quiet streets. Why did we choose this segment? And there's a lot that went into this process. There's a lot of staff input, a lot of hours put into investigating really what was our best option moving forward. And a couple things came to light on this segment. The first being that the town owns just shy of 50% of the property along this run. That not only allowed us to leverage our property as a match, or at least a portion of that property, but it also allowed us to activate a lot of the green space that's out there, which again, I'll get into details on that, but it's through an existing power line easement, which comes with restrictions, but has a lot of opportunity nonetheless. And then secondly, one of the areas that allowed us to, or really tipped our decision to move forward on this, is to the south. There's 4 parcels, 2 of which are owned by Dominion, 2 that are owned by Charleston County School Districts. Both partners that we work with on almost a daily basis, have a great relationship with, and did not anticipate, and still do not anticipate, any sort of negative feedback on that, and we'll get into their public comment and public support as we move through the presentation. So getting into the project details themselves. So just over a mile, it's a 6,300 linear feet of new proposed 10-foot separated multi-use path. The intent is to pull this path away from the roadway, away from Whipple Road, which is signed for 35 miles an hour, sees an 85th percentile speed of about 40 miles, so that's what the average traffic is traveling at, and has about a daily volume of just shy of 20,000 vehicles. So moving pedestrians away from that rather busy roadway, is the intent to both enhance the user experience as well as just to provide that general safety feature. Again, intends to utilize the existing power line easement, a 10-foot trail. We may have to reduce that width in areas where we are trying to reduce those individual property owner impacts to 8 feet. And we've had those discussions with those property owners. Other unique features that this path will provide is the town's largest tennis facility, operated and run by the town, is located along this route. And it sees a lot of traffic. It's not only our tennis facility, but it also includes a baseball diamond in the back there. So there are other recreational events that occur in this area, and a really great tie-in to this. And of course, with the easement area, there's a lot of opportunities for future parklets and connections to neighborhoods along here, including Snee Farm, one of the larger subdivisions within the town. Obviously, this project meets all of the Mount Pleasant Way's goals, but it also, I believe, meets the Greenbelt's goals of connecting, again, those hubs and spokes. And one important piece to note here as well is we've outlined the areas within this easement, within the existing power line easement, to be just shy of 13 acres of open space. That one of the other reasons why we selected this corridor. With this kind of open space, even though it's restricted on what we can do with it at times, this doesn't exist in Mount Pleasant really anymore. We've developed to the point where we don't have these larger parcels that the public can go to and enjoy that haven't already either been purchased through the Greenbelt or through the county, such as Laurel Hill County Park. So there was a real opportunity here to capitalize on something for the public to activate the space. So what this slide is intended to show is really what the ask is. You know the final number that's been presented, $734,430 for right-of-way or recreational easements on these properties. But this is a breakout of really who we're dealing with along this stretch of roadway. We've got a total of 7 private residents. We have the big parcel that's underneath the easement that's closest to Long Point is actually owned by the Snee Farm HOA. Makes up about 5 to 6 acres of property there. We have Landings Run HOA property, which is just their entrance feature sign. So no residential impact there. Dominion Energy, as I stated earlier, owns 2 of those parcels. Charleston County, the remaining 2 as you move towards Mathis Ferry Road. The town does own the remaining 5 parcels, which include obviously the tennis court, and as you reach our southernmost parcel, there's actually an existing walking loop path there that is intended as part of this project as we move to the design phase to be rethought, refurbished, and incorporated into the overall design. One thing I think is very important to mention is while this application only has a town match of about 46%, what that includes is an assumed 14-foot width of right-of-way or recreational easement along our property. So that's a 10-foot path with 2 feet on either side for maintenance activities. It does not include the whole parcel, which would have bumped our, if we would have applied using that scheme, would have bumped up our match to 191% or $3.8 million. And I'll tell you why we did not do that within this application. It was discussed very in depth internally, is because I will state up front and foremost, it is the intent of the town to utilize our property as open space and to develop parklets within our property as we move forward with the design. But because we have not begun that design process, which has a component of public input, we did not want to come up with any sort of restrictions that the Greenbelt would have levied upon those that would have eventually possibly been in conflict with what the public wants to see there. So again, I think it's just important to note that it is the intent of the town to utilize this area as public space through the development of parklets, but we want to see really what the public has to offer at that point, and that's why our match is considerably less than it would be otherwise. So what have we done to this point as far as public involvement? Obviously, there are requirements that the Greenbelt application levies, one of which is to conduct a public meeting. We did hold a public meeting on the 6th of January at the R.L. Jones Center, one of the town recreation facilities, in very close proximity to this project. We did have 30 to 40 participants, a really pretty decent turnout all considering. 3 actual residential impacted property owners showed up, made some great suggestions, great comments, are in support of the project and are in support of the project moving forward. In addition to this meeting, the Snee Farm HOA board was not able to attend or send a representative. We did meet on site with them individually to hear their concerns, answer their questions, and again, they are also on board with this project moving forward. In addition to the public meeting to capture those folks who didn't feel comfortable attending in person, obviously we provided project contact information on the website, but we did hold and host a virtual survey, which went into a number of different things, which you can reference in the application. We provided the results of that survey within there. So we did have 357 participants. This is very high if you have experience with public surveys on projects that aren't really contentious. This got a lot of participation. Just to give you reference, the Mount Pleasant Way Master Plan Storyboard and Public Survey received 2,500 comments. So over 10% of, 10% of that makes up what we saw through this smaller 1 mile trail segment. A lot of public support. I've got some quotes from some local neighbors, a student at Lucy Beckham High School, very excited to be able to utilize the trail. Another resident in the area that runs the trail every weekend looks forward to seeing the improvements. Again, all of these minute details you can see within the application packet. So what are we connecting to as part of this 6,300 linear foot section of trail? Well, the immediate connections are to, it's rather hard to see, but there is an existing 8-foot multi-use path trail that's just shy of 2 miles long that exists currently at the intersection of Mathis Ferry and Whipple and runs all the way down Mathis Ferry to Hospital Drive and Hospital Drive all the way to Bowman Road. So we have an existing connection. This isn't an isolated portion of trail. This is rather an extension of an existing trail. Other connections in the area, we have the Lucy Beckham High School, which is going to full capacity this coming year. Important piece to note, we have the Live to Play Center, which not only offers recreational activities as a private club, but is a certified K-12 school and hosts on-site and virtual classes. We have Seacoast Church, which offers daycare opportunities. And then just outside of the realm of this project, other sort of institutional and educational opportunities. East Cooper Baptist Church runs a full K-12 program at their facility. Bell Hall Elementary is right down the road from that. And then connecting to the existing trail along Hospital Drive, we have James B. Edwards Elementary. Moving on to town-owned facilities, we've spoken about the tennis center already. Two other important features to note are the town's only senior center, located on Von Kolnitz here, again accessible by the existing multi-use path, and then the R.L. Jones Center where the meeting was hosted. And then just to show future connections to one of the other sort of hubs, as you may call it, to the commercial districts of Town Center and then the Bell Hall Shopping Center. So in summary of this project, again, we're looking to install a 6,300 linear foot, 10-foot multi-use path. It requires allocation of actually 13 properties. We have these important connections that cover the slew of classifications from recreation, residential, educational, future commercial connections. And I think really another important piece to note is even though this is really a spokes application, the opportunity for the hub aspect of that within these easements exists very much so, not only from the easement area, but again, these other town-owned facilities. Those are attractions for our residents and visitors. And then in closing here, in addition to today's meeting, assuming there's an approval to move on, this is sort of our schedule moving forward to take this to the full Greenbelt Committee and Charleston Finance, County Council, and then begin the design process of the trail. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions you may have on specifics.
Questions from the committee to the applicant? Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just making sure I heard you correctly, James. There's really you haven't had considerable opposition by anybody so far on this section?
No, ma'am. There's been no opposition. There's been questions as to why we've chosen this segment, and after detailing, very similar to what I did in this presentation, those residents have seen the merit in this process here.
Okay.
One question. Why is our closing cost $100,000? That seems high for most.
Yeah, so the application for $734,000, $430 does include those closing costs associated. So
different owners.
Different owners, exactly.
And appraisals on different properties.
Absolutely, that's exactly
Okay,
it.
that makes sense.
Yes. We had two projects before. One was approved and one was not approved, I think. What was the reason for that one not being approved?
I think the The project that was approved was the Scalenville Prayer House. The project that was not approved, I think, actually might have been deferred for
That's
further-
correct. You all approved it. The GAB approved it when it went to council. They deferred it pending more information, more input from the community. We did have community members show up to the council meeting in opposition to the project. You didn't hear any of that because they didn't show up for these meetings. And I believe at the time, the town decided that they would just withdraw that application for now, since it was a little bit controversial, and focus on these different sections that were more likely to happen without opposition.
So you sound like you have that taken care of, that you do have the support of all the residents that you'll be impacting.
Yes, sir. So as part, obviously, of the Greenbelt process, we not only have to notify the individual impacted property owners, but a 300-foot radius of adjacent property owners. All property owners have been notified and have either not submitted any emails or calls in opposition of the project, or have submitted support of the project, in addition to all of the other sort of public input that we receive in the packet. All the folks in the easements, Dominion, Berkeley Electric, Mount Pleasant Waterworks, all of those folks who own those utilities within the easements, although not property owners, are in support of the project as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any public comments? Okay, any motions? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on, Mr. Kerr.
Well, Mr. Kerr's coming up from City of Isle of Palms. Just a quick run through for the project. It is the ADA walkover at 34A beach access on the Isle of Palms. It's that little strip of red that you see on the map there, between 34th and 35th Street on Isle of Palms. It's fee simple request. Actually, it's minor improvement only request. I see that I didn't change over my bullet points here, so I think I missed some of those from Town of Mount Pleasant, but it is minor improvement only request, and we'll let Doug take it from here.
Eric, what's the yellow a little bit further down?
The yellow further down, that's a county park. So that is Charleston County Parks right there at the pier on Isle of Palms.
Okay.
That's where all the parking is.
We had didn't we approve a project before, and that was also withdrawn?
We did. That one was withdrawn. Doug could probably speak a little bit more to why that one was, but we refunded them that money, and they felt like this would be a better site for the ADA access to the beach. All right, there you go, Doug.
Thank you very much. Douglas Carr, Deputy Administrator for the City of Isle of Palms. Thank you all for having me here today. I'm excited to present this opportunity to you all. As Eric has said, this is a request for a beach access path at 34A. It's simply going to be a boardwalk that will connect the Palm Boulevard right-of-way to the public beach there, somewhat in the middle of the island, centrally located on the Isle of Palms. And just as at a high level, the City Council for the City of Isle of Palms has very much embraced the idea of improving access for those with physical challenges to getting to the beach. They frequently hear stories of people trying to go to the beach, unable to traverse that soft sand and unable to get to the beach. And the community has an aging population. It's becoming a more acute problem with time. So that's really been a focus of the council. So that's why that's why this has been, now this is the second request before you all to improve that access for those with challenges to the beach. We recognize that you all know what the Greenbelt money can be used for, but for the benefit of the public, The beach communities do have this ability to fund boardwalks. With those fundings, we would love to be able to buy property within our community, but obviously the price points out there don't make it feasible. So we'd really like to focus on getting the public to what we consider our most valuable asset, which is that public beach. We know it's a tremendous asset to the Low Country and the state as a whole, and we would love to be able to get people out there that currently have real challenges getting out there. This path, and we'll go in a little bit to the details of the design here in a future slide, but this particular path was chosen because of several reasons, but primarily because it is a very low, the topography of this path naturally is very low. You can see that in the photo there on the right side of the screen, that the Isle of Palms has the luxury of a very tall primary dune. And when you couple that large, tall primary dune with OCRM's requirement that boardwalks be at least 20 inches above that dune, it creates a situation where ramps have to go significantly uphill. The ADA requirements require a slow slope with resting spots. So these ramps, and we've built 2 of them over larger dunes, they end up being, a several 100-foot journey uphill, which can create a tremendous challenge for those with physical disabilities. So this one in particular is flat, and while the boardwalk will be slightly elevated, it will just be really will just be a very small incline, which we expect somebody either in a wheelchair or walker or other challenges would have a much easier time traversing this access. I think you probably all know very well where the beach is on the Isle of Palms and in comparison with the rest of the county, but that's a slide to just show, kind of how central the Isle of Palms is, how it is probably the most accessible beach to the vast majority of the population in the county. So we know that it's very heavily utilized by the public in general of Charleston County and areas beyond. This map is showing the fact that currently the city has, we actually have 4. There's one not shown on here in the commercial district because it is not, it's a little bit unique in and of itself. But those away from the commercial district, there are currently 3, and there is about a 25 block absence of a path. And the one there, there's one at 9th and there's one at 42nd, and those avenues are sequentially numbered with the paths, and this one is at 34. So we feel like it's well positioned between the existing paths. It also, different people come to the beach and they want to go to different parts of the beach. We try to steer them sometimes, but those efforts are pretty futile. They want to go where they want to go. So we feel like this is positioning it in a good location in the middle of other existing paths. And while I have that slide up, I will just mention that the path that is being contemplated with this request will be the best on the island to date. It will be the only that will have dedicated parking immediately adjacent to it. That's not there now, but the city will be adding it if this project is successful. It will also, as I said, be extremely flat, and it will be a hardened surface. We have some paths that are just a matting that gets rolled out, and that matting over time undulates and becomes a little bit of a challenge. It's better than It's better than soft sand, but it's still challenging. So this really will be the premier path on the Isle of Palms. That's an aerial view of the path. It's highlighted there in green. As I mentioned, there would be, if this project is successful, there would be two ADA spaces added immediately adjacent to Palm Boulevard on the upper part of that photo. And I would also mention, while you're looking at this slide, that OCRM requires that the city stop these beach accesses as soon as they get over the primary dune. As you all know from your visits to the beach, when you get over the dune, the sand is still very soft, very, very hard to get through. So all of our paths currently lead out. They're nice, decent surfaces, but then they go into extremely soft sand that really creates challenges for particularly wheelchairs. The city has been working with OCRM for years, and we think that we are close to a resolution with them whereby they will allow us to extend an additional matting beyond this boardwalk and connect the primary dune out to that hard packed sand. So while this application only goes to the end of the vegetation there, that green rectangle there extends out to where we hope to eventually be able to extend this path to. I've really gone over the majority of these details already, but we do have a design already done. The city has done that. I would just tell you that the path as it's contemplated will have a section of pervious concrete that will be closest to the road. It will connect the parking spaces and extend towards the ocean for about 130 feet. The city has had a good experience with pervious concrete. It's a hardened material, and it's much more cost-effective than the wood structures, and it's lower maintenance. But once the path transitions into OCRM's jurisdiction, it will then transition to a wood traditional boardwalk. We do, as I mentioned, we anticipate it being very low, so we don't expect it to need to have guardrails, which will visually, it will keep the path from obstructing the view of folks around it and maintain a low profile for view corridors. There at the end, we're also explaining that we do hope to extend matting out farther down the beach. This is the budget that we are expecting for this project. We're requesting $120,000 for minor improvements from the Greenbelt funds. The city is going to match that with $47,300 for other expenses, for a total project of $167,300. Next steps, if the project is funded, we think we're at a point where we're ready to go out for bidding and get the project completed. I would also, it was alluded to earlier about a similar request at a different location. The city had requested similar funding for 42nd Avenue. The neighborhood, the area, and that access is currently used as an emergency access for fire and police rescue operations. It also it's a very heavily utilized path, and the point was made to our council that the city would be better served to direct people away from that path just because it's so heavily utilized now, especially in the summer. We have emergency vehicles going up and down the path. And a wheelchair can get down that path without that boardwalk. So we felt like it would be better, it would better use the funding to build a brand new boardwalk where there currently is not really much access at all. So that's all I have. Be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Any questions from committee? Elizabeth?
Yeah, Doug, can you go back to the map or even that one and just show us exactly the transition point from the pervious to the wood?
So the back of those houses, if just kind of a visual cue,
Yeah.
if you look at the back of what's kind of manicured there, visually, that is where it will, that's where it transitioned.
To wooden, okay.
So it's, the concrete is, most of it is wood, yes.
And then you said no rails, so the visual,
It's
the
in the
view
ground.
shed is clear. Do you have any kind of curb
Yes.
protection low on
Yes,
the
ma'am.
edges?
There will be a 4x4, basically a curb, a wooden curb.
Right.
Down each side to keep a wheelchair from
From falling off.
From
Yeah.
going off, that's correct.
Any other questions?
Well, just a quick point on the mats. Like I go out 9th Street periodically, and that mat seems very functional. It just over time they don't work as well. Is that right? Because it seems like a better bang for your buck. But
On the mats,
yeah,
the mats are very high maintenance. They also are not ideal. While they are better than sand, obviously, they need constant replacing. They undulate over time. So they're better than sand, but they're not as good as a boardwalk.
No.
Probably, for those that are familiar, 21st Avenue has really probably our other best access at this time. And if you go down that, you'll see it's concrete for a stretch, which is ideal for any wheelchair, and then it transitioned to wood, which we hear a little bit about the kind of clatter of the chairs over the wood. It's not ideal, but it's certainly better than matting and significantly better than soft sand.
Right. That's cool. Any public comments? Can I have a motion?
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
You got it.
Thank you.
Just
That's it.
just a reminder for meeting next,
Next Thursday, 9 o'clock.
Thursday, 9 o'clock, same place.
Done.
Thank you.
One of Sam's kids'
What
names.
did we do on the first? Did we approve them?